So, my name is Adam Boyne, and I'm going to be talking about starting a startup. Learn from us. For those of you who have started companies or thinking about it and done some research and things, you'll know that starting a company is pretty difficult. It takes a lot of hard work, and in the case of certainly me, it makes a lot of mistakes. The important thing, though, is that we have learned from those mistakes and we don't make them now, which is great, because it means it's important for me to pass them on to people so that in the future, people who start companies can do a little bit better than I did, a little better than you, and hopefully we can all run a Microsoft or in other ways. So to give you a little bit of background on me, Adam Boyne, hi, nice to meet you all. Thank you for coming to the talk. So that's the handle if you want to post any questions, check me out afterwards, all that kind of thing. So the company that I run is BetaJester. We're a startup based in East Yorkshire. We work on games, surprisingly, but also XR. We do things with clients, we do things for ourselves, make games, all that kind of thing. It's a lot of fun. You can check out the BetaJester handles for more information. We've been going for 3 years now. So before we started, we had no prior business knowledge. We were all programmers. We didn't do a business module. We just sort of started a company largely on a whim. We were given a great opportunity to have an office for a very reduced rate, so our overheads are very low. So every mistake, every decision we made was based on what we thought made sense at the time, and nothing was based. We did bits of research here and there. We had some guidance and mentors and that kind of thing, but no sort of prior knowledge. The other thing that I've been asked to remind everyone, please turn off phones, and you'll also get an email link for coming to this meeting to provide feedback. Feedback's really great, helps me improve, helps develop, give better talks, and decide if they don't want to keep me. So, BetaJester is the company. The three of us have all come from different parts of the country. We went to university together, and we all studied programming. We've all had to learn on the job, so everything that I'm going to be saying is something a mistake that we have made. I will confirm this on each one. Everything I'm going to say, though, is my personal opinion based on things. My co-founders may have different views, but they're not up here today. So it's going to be pretty quick. I would have talked about every mistake I've made, but I'd be here for about 6 hours, and I'd waffle on a lot. So we're going to cut it down, 35 minutes, and we've got 5 minutes of questions at the end. I've got 16 mistakes I'm going to talk about, so we're going to go 2 minutes per one, and there's a scale. So there are some mistakes that I class them as a mistake. You may not. They're not vitally important, but if it happens, it could mess you up for a day, a week, a month, whatever it is. There are ones that are quite big that realistically you want to avoid, and there are ones that are catastrophic and could just completely end your business. There is 110 that I will talk about. I'll try and keep it to 2 minutes, even though it's probably the most important. So let's begin. Number one. Failing to accurately track your time. It seems pretty straightforward. Like, obviously you want to know what you're doing. A lot of people start their companies and then don't really pay attention to how long they're working on things, how long it took them to do things. The problem with this is that you end up in a situation where you have work that has been done and you've taken way longer than you expected to do it, you've undercharged for it, and now you're in a situation where you don't actually know how long that took you. That's a major issue, particularly for a company who goes out and gets work, because you can't charge people correctly. That's a big problem. So how can we do this? There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can track your time accurately. There's very basic ways, like using Excel. You can just write your hours in. Personal preference here, Toggle is a free or subscription service that allows you to track time over a period of time. It has an app, it has the whole sort of software as a service kind of thing going on. Tracking time is vitally important. We didn't do it for a long period of time, and we lapsed over the course of years, and particularly when you go into client work, when you have to submit things sort of proving how many hours were spent doing contracts, how many things time spent doing making games, very important for being able to, because you have a salary, you know how much it costs per hour is, having those hours available to prove, look, here we go, I worked on this many hours, this is how it is, this is the proof. It counts as evidence for a lot of things. Very important. From the start, would recommend that the moment you start doing things for your company, start tracking your time. Speaking of the company as well, setting it up too early is bad. It's not the worst. We did. We set it up too early because we thought, we're going to start doing work and stuff, we need a company, so we set it up immediately. The problem is that for startups, there are some fantastic advantages out there. The government likes startups, big businesses like startups, local enterprise partnerships like startups, because you're potentially the next big business who's going to employ people in their area and in that part of the country. So they set things up for startups, but you only count as a startup in the eyes of certain people for a certain amount of time. I'll give you an example of this. There's a type of funding called SEIS funding, which is the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme. It's a fantastic way of raising capital for your company because it gives a lot of tax breaks to people who would invest. You have to be under 2 years to do that. You have to be under, you can't apply for it if you're over 2 years. So if you started too early and you go, right, we're ready for, we're 2 years in, let's go, let's do it now. Oh, we registered 6 months too early, it's too late. We had an example of this month. We turned 3 years in May. There was a fund we were looking at back in November of last year. I didn't check that it was the limit on the time. We missed out because it was if you go over 3 years, that's it, you can't apply. Really, you only need to start your company when there is something about your company you need, which is you need a business bank account, because you need a company for that. You're applying for something that says you need to be a company. You're doing contract work with somebody who needs to work with the company. These are the sort of times you should be applying, when you need to. The later you can leave it, the more likely you'll be able to apply for things in the future. As a company, what you're doing, what you're selling, whether that's a particular game, whether that's a service, whatever it is that you're doing, is the entirety of your being, right? That's important. If you don't make it very clear what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're going to do it, people aren't going to pay for it because they don't know what they're getting. You can see this particularly on sites that are very big, like at Microsoft. You go to their website, it will say services, you look at it, every service is very clearly defined. It normally has an icon related to it, it's normally very short, less than 208 characters, less than a tweet in length. It has a snappy title, so for example, if one of our things is that we do virtual reality development, if I say virtual reality development, people go, yeah, okay, get that. If I say we do virtual environments experience building for clients, people are a bit like, okay, that's a bit specific, but fine. And then if I spent a page talking about the exact details of the bespoke development we do, people have switched off, it's gone, they're not paying attention anymore. Whereas if you keep it very short, very snappy, very clear what you do, people are going to be more engaged with it, and they go, right, I got it, I understand what you do, am I interested, yes, no, either way. It also helps to make people approach you, they know what you're selling, so it saves time from you having to deal with people who don't understand what you're selling, trying to get you to engage with work. This one is not, it's important. It is important. It's not immediately important from the day one, but the problem is that accountants are a cost. You have to pay them to get to do what you're doing. But that cost will save you so much money and time. And that's the thing, is that when you're a startup, time is a resource that you think is limitless, but it pulls you in so many directions that you end up not doing the things that are actually going to make you any money. So for example, doing your finances, doing your expenses, putting things through a system, that could take 4 or 5 hours in a day. It could take longer. It could take a week. And the problem is while you're doing that, you're not doing whatever it is that's going to make your company money. And when you're not making money, then that's it's pretty bad. If you're not making any money, then you will fall over. And this is the problem, is that lots of things as a startup are going to pull you. Networking will pull you away from work. Emails will pull you away from work. Accountants are there to help you with that and to take away one of the loads from you. It's important to find someone who works for you, a company that will work with you well, that you like. You can go out and invest. There's some game-specific accountants out there. There's general accountants out there who have some knowledge sort of from film, media, TV, otherwise. But it's important to go out and find an accountant, particularly when you start bringing in money, because you've got invoice work, that kind of thing. That is where you really want to be going and finding an accountant who's going to be able to help you through that. Especially when it comes to things like tax relief, taxes in general, auditing accounts, setting off accounts at the company's house. You need an accountant's going to know how to do that straight off the bat. You, me, I'd have to Google that for a week before I had any clue what I was doing. This has hit us several times. When we first started, it was we worked with a few companies who we considered as friends, and it was all, oh yeah, we'll get this done, and that'll be cool, and you pay us this, and that'll be fine. And things go wrong. Almost across the board, if you don't have a signed contract in place, something will go wrong. Because the problem is, a contract does two things. One, it defines exactly what's going to be supplied. And two, it remains as something that both sides agreed on when you started. We've had people come back to us on contracts and go, oh, this wasn't clear. And we get to go back and go, but it is. Here it is signed. There you go. You signed it. There is evidence for it. Whereas other clients we've had who have not paid us, and we go, can we have our money please? And they go, no. We're waiting for somebody else to pay us, and that's it. You can't, there's nothing to back you up on that. You haven't got a signed contract in place, you can't refer back to it, you can't take it to anyone. You can't, it's just your word against theirs, and that's not a situation you want to be in. I'm not saying that everyone you work with will ever do that, but when the ones who will do, it's really important to have this in place because it allows you, it gives you, even as a small company, an end point, the place where you can stand and go, well, you can't cross this line because this is where you signed. And it's also useful for being able to know exactly what you're delivering. Contracts generally you can cover, and specs in my case, will detail exactly what you think the client wants. The client gets a chance to review that, read it through, understand what they're going to be getting. If they're happy, they sign off. And then you know that if you fit the bill of that contract, you deliver what you say you're going to deliver, the client will be happy. And at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want the client to remain happy at the end of things. This is sort of similar to the services point. Traditional bricks and mortar stores, if you went up to a shop that was blank white, maybe it's brick, maybe just boards, you just kind of look at it and go, that looks a bit dodgy, I don't want to go in there. The reason that shops decorate themselves, put out front, is because they're trying to attract people in. And this is true for startups, this is true for digital companies. Everybody needs a shop front. We left it way too long to set up our website properly. We've got one now, but when we first started, our website was, I think it was maybe a blog that I'd written without, it may have had a logo, I'm not even sure if it had a logo. But the problem is that no one's gonna see that and think, that seems like a respectable company that I want to work with. It's gonna see that and think, oh, that's a bunch of amateurs, or not even a real company. And that's a problem. You want people to see you as a legitimate service that they can hire. And so things like having a Twitter, having a Facebook, having an email address that is not at Hotmail or at Gmail are really important because it legitimizes your company and your startup in the view of your client. I've had emails from people before who when they come, I'm like, oh, I want to find out more about that company, let me see their website at gmail.com. Okay, I don't know where to go from here. And that's a problem. You want people to go somewhere and be able to go, right, here's what we're doing, here's our games, here's our services, we sell this, go to our Twitter. It doesn't have to be, people think Twitters have to be super active and stuff. It doesn't have to be active, it just has to be focused. As long as you're selling who you are as a company in there and talking about things that are relevant to you, that's enough, right? Same with Facebook. As long as there is a page that someone can go to and see that you are a legitimate company, you do things occasionally, that gives them a point of view of going, this is a legitimate company, I'd like to work with this company, I know they exist. Now, this is my 10 priority one. When you start a company, you automatically have people that you trust. A lot of them will be your friends, a lot of them will be people that you've met. Sometimes there'll be business leaders and mentors that you've met in your priority, met in your order of setting up your company. Trusting somebody who is untrustworthy is so dangerous that it can sink your company, and did nearly sink ours. There are people who seem trustworthy, who do things that are clearly at odds with your company, are not people you should be trusting. It seems straightforward, but we trust the people who did good things for us, they helped us out, and we thought, great, they're trustworthy, and we weren't paying attention when they were doing things that exploited us. They were getting us to work for free. They were getting us to do other bits and pieces which really put us in a very precarious position. And it wasn't until we realized that we were in a dangerous position and got out that we really started the company. If somebody is trying to if you have a business mentor, they should be all about you. When they're talking to you, they have their own stuff outside, that's fine. But they want to help you, they want to propel you, they want to see you succeed, because that's why they're there, that's why they're a mentor. So if you're working with somebody and they ask you, do you mind just doing this work for me for free? Or, look, I know we want to work together, but can you just cut your rate down altogether, do it for a real cheap price? Or, I see you met that client, can you just introduce me, because that work that you're doing, I might be able to do that better. All these sort of things are steps that people who you should not be trusting take. These are people who want to use you for what you're good at, and that's a problem, right? If you wanted that, you'd go and work for somebody and then do this, and then you get paid a salary to do things for somebody else. You start your own company because you have something that's worth providing that people want to pay for. It's difficult to always know. It's difficult to you have to take it on face a lot of the time. You have to work with people and hope that they sort of have their best interest in mind and see how they react, the things that they do. Are they introducing you to people? Are they talking about you positively? Do they show you things? All these sort of stuff are good. If they're doing negative things, if they're doing bad things, you have to go, this working relationship is not for me. Thank you very much. A bit more light-hearted, less lower priorities now. Networking is super vital, especially in this industry. I mean, for everyone who's here, you're probably fine because you're at Develop. Develop is one of the best networking opportunities in the country for the games industry. Networking is how you're going to find the majority of your clients. Most work does not come just from having a website. I think we've had 2 jobs in the last 3 years that have come from having a website, and even those are people who found us because they found somebody else who we'd networked with and it went through that way. Going out and meeting people is how you're going to build things. It's how you spread your network around. It's how, when work appears somewhere in that chain, it comes back to you. It's like a spider web. When something way down that end buzzes, there's a fund, there's a new project come out, we need someone to make a game. You need people who at that end go, oh, I remember meeting BetaJester, and they said they did VR, and so right, you just said you want VR. Let me introduce you to those guys. That's how especially the big work is going to come through, and it legitimizes yourself in the industry as well. The more people that you meet, you can go to events and see people. They'll introduce you to other people. It's how you build up as a company. If you're at Develop, you're probably fine. It's not. It's just. But look at your sort of local area. Is there a group in your local area that's worth meeting? Is there a hub that's worth going to? And just keep building that network up. However, over-networking is also a problem. It's a really weird balance. When we first started, we were very conscious of the fact that we needed to build a network. So we went to almost everything. And the problem is, especially in the games industry actually, there are a lot of networking events. Especially when you start to look across the area. So in my area in Yorkshire, there are small local hubs, there are regional hubs, there are semi-regional hubs, so there's like areas, Yorkshire is a hub, but then also East Yorkshire is a hub, then North Yorkshire is a hub. Then there are national events, and there's always lots of them, and then there's big conferences down in London that always suggest you should go to them, and then there's international conferences as well, and you end up in a situation where you're not actually in the office anymore, you're just out networking with people. And again, as I said before, the problem with that is that if you're not doing the thing that you're good at and not working through, you're not making any money. Networking is great because it presents the opportunity to make more money, fantastic. But if you don't have the time to work on it because you're out networking, it's going to go back the other way. Ooh, sorry. The key thing with networking is that some events are fun, parties, stuff like that, but are unlikely to turn into any sort of real business connection. They're still important. I still recommend going to some because you want to keep that friendly relationships are better than the sort of purely business ones. But some events are events for events' sake. If we take VR, for example, in the last sort of 2 years, there's been a joke in the VR industry that there's just an event every day. And there has been. It's been crazy. You have to start looking at, is this event worthwhile? Who's going? Are they important? Is this an event for low-level people in a company? Or is this the event where the people who hold the purse strings are? Is this an event full of people that I've already met, that I already know, that already would give me work? Or is it an event full of people who I've never met before and I can actually build up what I want to be doing? It's really important to start looking at all the events that are worth going to and picking the ones that have the most value to you. Develop, great example, fantastic for meeting a whole bunch of different people across the board. But also there's also events at Develop that are less worthwhile. Like if you look at all the different networking parties, some will have everyone and it's really important to go to because there's lots of interesting and high-level people. Some are much smaller events which are more focused on people showcasing the game. And if you're a startup and you're not showcasing, it's fun to play games, but there's not going to be anyone there who's going to be interested in you because they're there for the games. It's an awkward one because a lot of the time it's very difficult to get anywhere without doing something. A lot of people that we work with are interested in having seen prototypes, and that's great because you go, okay, well I can prove what I'm doing. But the thing is, you're doing something that has a worth to someone. You are worth money. That's the bottom line. The reason you start a company is because you have a service that is worth something, a cost. It's worth something to someone. And doing stuff for free undervalues what you're good at. The thing is, I'm not going to stand here and say that you should do nothing for free, because I don't agree with that. Because the reason is that I've seen people, I've worked with people who are interested in getting experience, and they are willing to put work into that. And at the end of the day, if I go, look, if you want to do work experiences are free, is an example of free work that's worthwhile because it gives you something that you don't have. It gives you the experience of working at a games company, for example. For us, we worked with companies who are looking to put bids in to much larger companies, but they need something, but they need to prove what they're doing to do it. An example would be building your own game. You will not get a publisher signing onto a game that has nothing behind it. You're going to need to build a prototype. So you're working for free for yourself, but you're working for free. All these sorts of things are important, but you have to strike that balance. If you're building something that has a direct worth to the people that you're pitching it to, if what your prototype has some value to them, then really you shouldn't be doing it for free. And equally, this is in the reverse, if you have a contract in place and you've been doing work with somebody, extending beyond the realms of that contract just to satisfy someone and make them happy is also not a good idea. Which links into my other point. When you have a very set cost, so this includes the two examples of this. So if you have a contract which is X amount of money, but also for bids. So if you receive an amount of grant money, the goal is not to go big. It's very easy to think that that's the way forward. The example for us would be, we did the UK Games Fund Transfuser competition where you get a set amount of money, which was £5, and you get to build a game. So in our heads we were like, right, we've got £5, we've got 10 weeks, what can we build, what can we build? And we built a huge procedurally generated planet with boats and sailing and crafting and fighting and customization and quests and some other bits and pieces that too many to mention. And while there's a lot of stuff in there, and we were very proud of what we built, and we can go, yeah, look, it's got this, and this, it was so buggy. It was so buggy because we spent all this time building as much as we could and not actually thinking about, well, is it going to be any good at the end? The point is that if you have a set amount of money, that set of money should represent a set amount of time. What is the best thing you can build in that set amount of time? So for me, building something that is small but it's focused and polished, like a jewel, for example, is more important than building something huge and ungainly. If it's big and it doesn't work, people aren't going to be impressed by it. They'll just go, okay. But if it's a small, tight, focused experience, that's something that has an inherent value to it that people like. If you have a very set cost and you can't go beyond it, you shouldn't be putting more time into that than you need to. Similarly, failing to take advantage of opportunities is another way in which you can end up in a situation that's undermining the value of your company. As a startup, as I mentioned before, being under 2 years old, that kind of thing, people love startups, companies love startups. We are really important to the future of economies because we grow, some of us grow, some of us get bought out, some of us come up with products that are going to change the face of everything. All the big companies now you look at, Uber was a startup, Facebook was a startup, everything was a startup at some point. Because people love startups, there's a lot of value in the discounts that are available to startups. It's like being a student, right? People want to give you stuff. They want to help you out because they know being a startup is very difficult and it costs a lot of money to be a startup. There's a lot of sleepless nights, there's a lot of ramen noodles, there's a lot of things that you have to do as a startup to get by. So research, find out what can you get. Are there grants that you can get? Is there a small amount of money you can get? Look at your local enterprise partnerships, they normally have something. We were able to take advantage of a £700 grant, which helped us out no end at the start. £700 is nothing. But right at the start, when we were scraping off the end of overdrafts, it was vital. Also, plus recommendation, Microsoft BizSpark has been a lifesaver. It gives you access to all the Microsoft products for 3 years as a smart startup company. Just being able to have Word or being able to download a version of Windows when you have a new PC is so useful and much easier than trying to find a CD that you lost in a cupboard 2 years ago. It can be difficult when working, especially with big companies, to realize that you have, as I've said quite a few times, you have an inherent value to them, and you have an inherent value in and of yourself. The reason that I say about having terms and conditions, having contracts in place, is because some clients will say that you are wrong in certain situations. We had a client who misunderstood, they misunderstood what Facebook was. They thought Facebook was a ubiquitous platform, and by making sense of Facebook, it would be a mobile game, and a console game, and a this, and a this, and a this, and a this, and a this. And come release day, despite the fact that we've sort of gone, it's not going to be on phones, they went, I'm trying to play it on my phone and it doesn't work. Had we not in a position where we had signed terms and conditions and turned around and talked to them, there's nothing we can do at that point. We go, oh, right, we have to do something. We stood up to them and said, no, it's in the contract, we told you this is not the case. Then they were mad, they said things that I was not impressed by, and we had a long argument, but in the end, they had to concede, and they paid us for the extra work that we had to do. Now, that wasn't a great relationship, and unfortunately that relationship deteriorated because of what happened. But the point of the matter is, we stood up for what we believed in, we stood up for what was right in our eyes, and based on the contract that we had in place with them, and we got back what we deserved. We got paid for the work that we did. By standing up to the people when you feel like you're in the right and standing up for what you believe in, you prevent people from undermining the value of the work that you are doing. It's difficult. It feels that you feel out of place, but you have to think, it's what you do in real life. If somebody's called you out on something that you haven't done, you would stand up to them and go, well, no, that's not correct. And it's the same is true in the business world. Frivolous spending is the amount of frivolity, it can be interchangeable, but the issue more here is, as being a startup, things are very rollercoastery. Sometimes when you get paid a contract, it's great. You get loads of money, fantastic. Woo! Let's go upgrade all our equipment, let's buy a bunch of stuff, let's get better office chairs with nice back support and that go up and down, fantastic. 6 months later, when that money's all been spent, you're in a position where you're going, yeah, we need a contract in now or we're going to collapse. And that's the problem, is that it's very difficult to forecast spending on, especially when you're doing client work, because contracts are so infrequent that you have to remember, even when you have a lot of money from a particular job, that at some point you might have no money again. You have to be in a situation where you're going, right, are the purchases that we're making worthwhile? Is this the cheapest deal we can do? Is there a discount for startups, like I was saying? Am I on the right license? Do I need to pay this subscription, or can I do it on a free version? Is it worth buying an open return train ticket, or is it worth buying something in advance and splitting the journey? What is the way that I can do this for the best value possible? It's a point that makes sense. It's something that's straightforward and we should do in our everyday life anyway. But particularly at the start, when you are relying on that money, and in a couple of months' time, the £100 could be the difference between being able to make rent or not. Every pound is important, no matter if you've got the money in the bank or not. Going back to the example of the situation where we had the problem with Facebook platform client, every time we've done something that's gone wrong, we have to learn from it, because if we don't learn from it, we're liable to make the same mistake again. History repeats itself. In the case of that client, we changed our standard contract to include a section about this is exactly what you will get, this is what you will not get. And the reason we did that is because we realized that certain clients, we could see things coming. We could see that there might be a miscommunication. We tried to make it clear, but they hadn't understood. So we added that in, so then in the future, they would know exactly what they're going to get and exactly what they weren't going to get. And that's come in handy, because we've had conversations with clients since where we go, oh, see, well, exactly, you're not going to get this. Or they've picked it up at the start and gone, oh, it says in the contract that you're not going to deliver this. Is that right? And that's great. That's start of the contract, you're in a position to negotiate, to go, well, this is why, and etc., and this is what's going to change, and etc., etc., etc. It is incredibly useful to learn from those mistakes and put things in place to prevent them happening again. Mistakes will happen. It's part of life. You can see 16 of my mistakes up here. But each one is something that has happened, I've learned from it, I've moved on, and the next time it comes up, I won't make it again. And that's important. As I said at the start, these are my opinions. These are what I think based on the mistakes that I have made. Don't take people's opinions as gospel. Take them with a pinch of salt, learn from them, use them, read about them, research them, and make your own decisions about these things. A big one for me was that a couple of people at the start, when I first started, gave opinions about other people. They gave opinions about other businesses, clients, oh, don't work with them, oh, they did this to us, etc., etc. And we took it as gospel. We just went, oh, yeah, okay, no. And we've missed out on a lot of work. We've missed out on a lot of work because I listened to people without doing my own research. I thought, oh, okay, what you said, I trust you, you must be true. Experiences are very personal. Misunderstandings happen between everyone. It is worth when you hear somebody telling you something going, I'm going to check that out for myself. I just want to make sure. And that includes me. Just because I told you these things doesn't mean they're right for you. It's worth going and looking into this. But these are the sort of things that I was told when I first started. So yeah, make sure you go and research everything, make sure you look into it, and find out the sort of situation that you want to be in. Okay. I have no concept of time at the minute because I don't have a clock, but I'm going to guess we're in a right sort of situation for any questions and answers. So if anyone's had any questions about what I'm talking about, the points I've made, or any questions about me as a business and what's happened, please let me know now and we can have a little chat. Oh, you've got, I think you've got a microphone. Sorry.
When you were talking earlier about your contracts,
yep.
Do you have a company lawyer or do you manage your own contracts?
So our contracts are based on, we were provided a sort of an example contract from a friend of ours. We have a business friend who ran another startup. We asked them for advice. They said, I can provide you some of our example documents, so we're using that. We've read through it. We're happy with this. But similarly, we also had we had our first small amount of funding. We were given a very big contract, which we were like, we want to check this. We went and spoke to a local law firm, and they said, because we were a startup and the guy was a business angel, he said, look, I'll take a look at this because it's just having a read through and give you some general advice for free, which was fantastic. But then it meant we started a relationship with that company. So we don't personally have a lawyer, but I know that if we had something that's big and important, that we'd go and do it. But also we've started a relationship with lawyers and solicitors and things like that, so that if that does happen and we do need to, we can go back to them and do it. So us personally, no, but we've made sure that we're in a position if we do need one, that we can go and do it.
So it's based on the sort of scale, like the contract, whether you see lawyers. So if it was a large scale,
yeah, absolutely. If it was something that had particularly complicated things, or there's potential for IP questions and that kind of thing, we would go and do that. But largely, we have a contract in place that we're happy with. We've read through it. We've referred it. We've got it from somebody that we trust. We've gone through it again, done our research, and we're happy with that. And when we pass it to people, every client we've given it to has been happy. Or if they've had questions with it, they've brought it up to us. But if we get big things in, like we got funding in, we'll go and check that out because you just don't want to get caught out, because if you are, there's nothing you can do.
Thanks.
Sorry. Anyone else? Yeah? Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course.
You said you did transfuser?
Yes.
My company and I are on this year's transfuser.
Fantastic.
And I was just wondering how you found the experience and whether you thought it was really useful or whether it screwed you up in any way.
Transfuser was very useful because of what we learned from what we did ourselves. When we started, Transfuser taught us a lot about the bidding process for getting money. Transfuser, you get £5,000 and an amount of time to do something. And so we planned and we read everything about it was a competition, we read about the rules and we were like, okay, build a concept. We'll build a concept. We built this concept, it's huge, it's massive, it's beautiful, da 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 da. And what we learned from that is that that's not what they were asking. There was more between the lines that we just sort of waved over because we were distracted by ourselves building this big concept. We ended up with a game that we tried to pitch that needed 180,000 to finish, and we were a company with about a year's experience. So people were kind of like, no, which was fair enough. But what we learned from that is then, right, well, next time we get some money, we make something smaller. We focus in on what they're looking for. It taught us a lot about the bidding process. It taught us about how we read what people want. And it taught us about if you're going to make a game based on an amount of money, you've got to make sure you're making the most of that money and the time that money affords you. So if I was to do Transfuser again, if I was doing it this year, I would say, and I gave some advice to the team last year, go for something that is incredibly small but incredibly polished. The most important thing is that you show someone they go, ooh, that looks good, and it's smooth and it works and there's no bugs. One of the biggest things that we had was we had the game, I don't think it crashed, but I think the camera froze in the wrong position during our demo, and our judge sort of was like, that's it. You could see it in his eyes, that's it, he didn't care about the game anymore. So we learned a lot from that process just by learning about bidding and how to read bids and how to read what people actually want.
Thank you very much.
It's all right, no worries. Any questions? Cool. Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, go.
What's the layout or structure in your company when you accept the contract to the time in the middle, when everything's happening and stuff getting produced, to when you deliver, and how contract just ends and how it's just
That's fine. So generally, the process is that somebody will go out, will have started everything. That's the person who's met the client, who's working through it, etc., etc. Often, just because the way that our company works is normally me, because I'm the one who does a lot of networking. But there's 2 other guys in our company, and they've done a lot of that as well. Our contracts all include a development breakdown, how we get the time it's going to take to work through it, what we're going to work through in a sort of linear order, the things it's going to do and the time it takes. So we know the client has a vague concept of how long it's going to take us to do. Once the client's signed off, we wait for the first payment. Once the first payment's come through, we're like, right, we'll start. That can depend on who's free at the time, who's working on contract. If somebody's working just on our own stuff, they're getting pulled into this. Who's got the skills to work on this particular project? From there, they plan it out, how we're going to develop it, how we're going to work on it, do I need to pull in one of the other guys for resources, and then we just work through it step by step based on the development breakdown that we've already written. Keep going back to the client, we make sure everyone's happy, we get to a sort of a milestone stage where we've got something to show them, maybe some UI. We go back to them, we say, this is what we've got, is this going in the right direction? Yes. It's really, just on the side, talking to clients consistently throughout a contract is super important. There's an old engineers joke about what the client wants and what the client gets to do with, usually the client wants a house and you're building a playground, and the reason being is because there was a miscommunication at some point at the start. And if you go, cool, we're going to build that, and then disappear for a year, and come back and go, here you go, the likelihood is you're going to have missed what they wanted. So constant communication with the client to make sure we're on the right lines. And then as we get to the end, we'll have clearly defined the delivery point in the specification. We make sure we're ticking every box, we know that we're fitting the specification exactly, we know what the delivery is because we've written it in, they know what it is, we deliver it as we've said we will, and then we make sure they're happy, make sure there's not a lot of feedback. We normally allow for a couple of changes based on things that might have adapted over time. And then we sign it off and we're done. And we make sure we get paid. For example, we've included work before, we said we will deliver you the code, but we're not going to publish it on a store. That's what we're going to do. And then they come back to us towards the end and go, actually, we want you to publish it on the store. And we go, okay, well, we're going to write it up, slightly new addition to the contract, we'll charge for that, and then we do that way. We've got to make sure they're happy with it. But we've had people who've gone, no, okay, we'll take the code and then we'll publish it on the store. As long as you've defined that final point, this is when we are done, then it's easy enough. But equally, the big one is when clients go, please tweak this, can you just change that, can you just change this a little bit? And that's again falling into the doing work for free. You've got to define how many times they can do that, the parameters of that, how much extra work you can do within that scope before you go, right, we've changed all these features, we've taken stuff out, put stuff in that's too far now, we're not going to do any more stuff for free. This is how it is. Or if you want to make changes, we'll charge it up on a cost, on a day rate or whatever. But yeah, generally the structure is that whoever started the contract, normally the person then builds up, has that relationship, and then we just pass it to whoever has the skills and the free time, build it up to a point, and then sign it off based on what we've already set up as the parameters for the contract. Cool.
Thank you for a great presentation. Sorry, I missed the initial part about your introduction.
That's right.
I was just wondering, does it ever get easy?
Is that what, sorry?
Does it ever get easy, running a business?
It gets, over time you build experience, and those experience, as I said before, by using those experiences and making sure things that have gone wrong don't go wrong again, you end up in a position where things are less likely to go wrong. It's less about becoming easier and more about becoming more straightforward. You are less surprised by things happening. You know how things are going to how they're going to work out. You plan ahead and make sure things are more likely to go in the right direction. It certainly gets, as long as you put those things in place and as long as you are learning from your experiences, it gets easier to plan. It gets easier to see where the money's coming from, where you're going to get clients from, build those relationships over time. It's always going to be tough because it's startups, in particularly micro startups and SMEs. There's only a few of you, so you're relying on each of you to pull your weight to be able to get everything done and across the board on all different areas, biz, dev, accounting, finances, whatever. So it's always going to take a lot of work, but as you continue to progress, it becomes more straightforward to get things done. I would never say that running a startup is easy, because it's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But it becomes more efficient, it becomes more straightforward, and you begin to understand sort of the highs and lows and the swings of how things are going to progress.
That's great. Also, as we are in the gaming technology, and one of those technologies which is moving all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Last 2 years has changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
How you yourself prepare yourself for future, what current processes you have to be on top of all that, how do you keep your staff trained, etc. I would like to understand that, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So all of us are plugged into social media, so a lot of these sort of, as things change and new things come out, appear on Twitter, appear on news sites, that kind of thing. So we keep an eye on these sort of things. We read up on new releases. If magically they're suddenly doing something, we go, all right, let's read about what they're doing. If there's a change in AR or a change in VR, we read up about it. Particularly when new technology comes out, we're always interested in having to play around with it. Sometimes we do it at home in our spare time, sometimes we do it in the office, because we want to stay ahead of the game. So it is really, it takes time and effort, but we just keep plugging away and finding out what's new, keeping ourselves on the ball, because it is changing. It's changing rapidly, and it's difficult. And I know that there is, we probably lapsed in because we're not paying attention. Because if we're focused entirely on VR, something will happen over in business development that we'll have missed, and that's natural. But it's more about knowing where to look to find those things and staying on the ball as much as possible, keeping an eye on what's changing, reading up on it, and just having a mess around. Because end of the day, that's how you're going to be able to know what you're doing. You have a play around, you get a feel for it, and then if somebody comes along and says, oh, this contract is in this particular area, you can say, yes, we've done a little bit of that, so we can work on that with you.
That's great. I can see a lot of passion in your voice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Anyone else? No? Yeah, go for it.
My previous question, when you said those extras at the end that the client asks for once, in a scenario like that, do you, in your case, in your experience, do you at the beginning say, okay, from this point on, anything else we do is going to cost you certain, like A amount per hour or this amount per week, or like, no, this is expected, we'll fix this bit, is like, where is the fine line?
Where's the line? Yeah, that's fair. It's difficult. It's very contract dependent. It depends on your relationship with the client. Normally we go by our specs are quite detailed. So we say these are the sort of places. This is what we're going to deliver. And when they start to push beyond the edge of the spec, it's normally in sort of the feedback stage where they want things changing. There are things that are easy to change: colors, branding, location, stuff like that. Fine. Like within reason. If we're constantly changing colors, then we're going to be like, that's not really cool. But ultimately, you have to accept that the client they have an idea of what they want at the end of the mind. They should be going in that direction. When they start asking for things like new features, or if they want completely new ways of things working, that's when you start to look at, well, why wasn't that brought up before? That would be in the spec, and that would have been costed for. It's starting to find a line between something that's within reason, and within then I'd say maybe a lot of people do a 3 iteration process, so they'll change things like that 3 times before they go, that's it, no more. It's finding that line between the things that are fair enough, changing colors, changing branding, changing an icon, changing text, fine. And that's a bit much, like, oh, can you now add a search function? It's like, no, because that's a whole new function that we haven't accounted for. That's going to take 5 days, so we're going to charge you for that. That's sort of a rough way of sort of defining the line. But ultimately, if you define a point like something like, we will do 3 iterations of changes in terms of non-functional things, colors, text changes, whatever, then that's a very defined point where the client knows, I've done it 3 times, that's it. If you don't know, at that point, if you don't know what you want, we're going to start charging you because we're doing all this extra work. It's a rough game. You have to sort of play it by ear in terms of what you think the client wants and what you're happy to do, but that's sort of a good sort of rule of thumb. Cool. Okay. I think it's been about 5 minutes. That might have been slightly over 5 minutes for questions, so I think I'll round it up now. But and it's on the next slide. If you want to drop me an email, I'm Adam at BetaJester. You can follow me on Twitter. You can drop me a message on there. Happy to chat to people and catch up what we're doing. The general rule of thumb is we've demonstrated that you do not need any business experience to be a startup, but you have to accept you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And it's better to be ready for that, to research, to look into what you're doing, to find out if it's right for you, if you're doing the things, if you're going down the right path beforehand, so that when you do hit those bumps, hit those questions, you're ready for them. Being a startup is hard. I will stand here and say that we've had points that have been very low. We've almost run out of money. We've almost closed. it happens. It's a strength of will to keep going and believing that you will find a way to sort it out and find the opportunities to sort that. But in return, you are working for yourself. You answer only to yourself and to your co-founders, who should be your friends at that point, or at least people that you respect. You do the work that you want to do, and that is a fantastic reward. It's a great balance of the fact that you can turn around and go, today I'm going to do this because I want to. And yeah, please give me feedback, and thank you for listening.